The rain came down in fine, relentless sheets, bouncing off the narrow streets of Seoul, where neon lights blurred into streaks of red and blue. Mariah pulled her cardigan tighter around her, shielding her son, Aiden, from the drizzle. Her hair, damp at the ends, clung to her face as she hurried past a row of closed shops, the evening air carrying the faint scent of sizzling tteokbokki from a nearby stall. She had been exhausted all day, 2 part-time jobs, a daycare drop-off, and now, the humiliation of a blind date. It hadn't gone well. The cafe was quiet when she arrived, soft jazz playing in the background. The man she was meeting, set up by a mutual acquaintance, greeted her with a polite smile, but it died the moment he noticed Aiden tugging at her hand. "So, you have a child?" he asked, voice tight, a slight sneer in the corner of his mouth. "Yes." "He's my son," Mariah said, trying to keep her tone even, but feeling the sting. She had expected questions, maybe curiosity, but not judgment. "I see," he said, leaning back. "I don't think this will work out. I was looking for someone simpler. Someone without complications." Mariah's chest tightened. She had been through this before. Men seemed to shrink away when they learned she was a single mother. But this one, she had hoped, might be different. She had been hopeful for the first time in months. And now, with that cold dismissal, all the warmth inside her drained away. She nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I understand. Thank you for your honesty." Aiden, sensing her sadness, hugged her leg. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. She knelt down to his height, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "We're okay, sweetie," she whispered. "Let's go home." They stepped back into the drizzle, Mariah holding her son's hand tightly. The streets were almost empty, except for a sleek black car parked at the curb. Its presence seemed out of place, immaculately polished, tinted windows concealing the driver. Mariah barely noticed it as she crossed the street. But then, as she approached a corner, a shadow detached itself from the car. The man was tall, dressed in a tailored suit that somehow made the rain look elegant instead of harsh. His dark eyes studied her with a quiet intensity, and for a moment, she felt like she was caught under a storm of something unfamiliar and unsettling. "Excuse me," he said in flawless English, his accent soft but undeniably Korean. "Are you all right?" Mariah blinked. Yes, I'm fine. Just tired." She tried to step past him, but his presence was commanding, not threatening, but impossible to ignore. "You're upset," he said, his gaze sharp but not cruel. "I saw what happened back there." Her heart skipped a beat. I don't know what you mean." He tilted his head slightly, as if assessing whether she was lying. "The man at the cafe. He was rude to you. You didn't deserve that." Mariah's throat tightened. Most people didn't care enough to notice. "It's fine," she said quietly. "It's just complicated." "Complicated doesn't mean unworthy," he said, and something in his tone made her stop. She looked at him more closely. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held an odd mix of curiosity and concern. There was something in his posture, the way he carried himself, that made Mariah realize he was not a typical stranger on the street. "Who are you?" she asked, hesitant. He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Someone who doesn't like to see injustice, even in small things." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "My name is Hyun-soo." Mariah swallowed. There was no way she could explain her life in a sentence. The struggle of balancing work, parenting, and simply surviving in Seoul, it was too much to unpack for a man who had just appeared from nowhere. But something about him felt different. Protective, but not overbearing. Respectful, but not distant. "I'm Mariah," she said finally. "And this is my son, Aiden." Hyun-soo's gaze softened as he looked at the boy. "Aiden," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You have a strong mother." Aiden smiled shyly, hiding behind her leg. "Hi." "Hello, Aiden," Hyun-soo said. His tone was gentle, deliberate. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just saw something I couldn't ignore. Mariah felt a strange flutter of emotion, embarrassment, gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. It's unusual for someone to care, she admitted. Especially here. He nodded. Seoul is big. People often ignore what they don't want to see. But I noticed you. And I wanted to make sure you were safe. They walked a few steps together, the rain creating a private little bubble around them. Hyun-soo stayed at a respectful distance, yet his presence was solid, unwavering. Mariah couldn't help but feel the weight of it. There was something commanding about him, a quiet authority that made people follow his lead even without words. You don't need to worry about that man at the cafe again, Hyun-soo said finally. His tone wasn't threatening, but it carried an unspoken promise. And if anyone tries to make you or your son uncomfortable again, I can handle it. Mariah's heart raced, half in disbelief, half in awe. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because no one deserves to be treated that way, he interrupted gently. And because I've learned that people who are kind and brave, like you, rarely get the recognition they deserve. Mariah's eyes misted. It was rare to hear words that weren't laced with judgment or pity. Hyun-soo was different. He didn't just see her as a struggling single mom. He saw her strength, her resilience, the fierce love she carried for her son. Thank you, she said softly, unsure if her voice carried enough of her gratitude. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied. Just keep walking forward. You're stronger than you think. For the first time in months, Mariah felt a flicker of hope. A strange, exhilarating hope that perhaps her life didn't have to be a constant battle. That maybe, somehow, she could find someone who saw her, not her circumstances, not her struggles, but her. As they parted, Hyun-soo gave a small nod, slipping back into the shadows of the rain-soaked street. Mariah watched him disappear, her chest tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She didn't know who he really was, what kind of life he led, or why he had chosen to intervene. But she knew one thing: meeting him had changed something inside her. A seed of curiosity, of wonder, had been planted. And somewhere deep down, she felt a quiet certainty that her life, complicated, messy, and beautiful, was about to shift in ways she could never have imagined. The days that followed were a blur of work, daycare runs, and the constant hum of Seoul's relentless energy. Mariah tried to push the encounter with Hyun-soo to the back of her mind, convincing herself it was a fleeting moment, just a stranger who had seen her struggle and disappeared into the rain. But every time she glanced at Aiden, laughing at some small, silly thing or showing off a drawing he'd made, she felt a subtle tug in her chest. She wanted someone who could see them, not as a complication, but as a family worth caring for. It was during her late-night shift at the diner that Hyun-soo returned. The restaurant was quiet, only a few customers lingering over steaming bowls of jjajangmyeon. Mariah was wiping down tables when she noticed him standing at the doorway, hands in the pockets of his perfectly tailored coat, a calm, almost unnerving presence. "Hyun-soo?" she asked, disbelief lacing her voice. "You, again." He gave a small, polite smile. "I promised I'd check on you. I wanted to make sure you and Aiden are safe." His gaze softened as it lingered on her tired expression, her hair falling in damp strands over her shoulders. "And I wanted to see you again." Mariah felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he replied smoothly. "Just let me help." She froze, unsure what he meant. Then, with a faint glance toward the kitchen and the few customers, she asked cautiously, "Help? How?" Hyun-soo stepped closer, his presence commanding yet calm. "You're doing so much on your own, and I know it's not easy. I can offer assistance, support, whatever you need, for you and your son." Mariah hesitated. Accepting help was not something she did lightly. Pride was a shield she had honed over the years, shielding herself from pity and judgment. But something about Hyun-soo felt different. He didn't look at her as if she were broken or incapable. He saw her, really saw her. And that made her heart ache in ways she didn't fully understand. Why would you care?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hyun-soo's eyes held hers steadily. Because some people deserve kindness. And because I recognize strength when I see it. You are strong, Mariah. But even the strongest people need someone to lean on sometimes. Her throat tightened. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not in years. Not since before she had Aiden. And hearing it from him, the mysterious man who seemed to move through the world with silent authority, made her feel strangely safe, as if she had stumbled into a storybook she didn't know she was part of. Before she could respond, the diner manager, a man named Sung-ho, appeared from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. His gaze fell on Hyun-soo, and Mariah noticed the subtle shift in his expression, an almost imperceptible flicker of recognition, quickly masked with annoyance. You again. Sung-ho sneered, his eyes narrowing. Do you have business here, or are you just loitering? Hyun-soo's posture didn't change, but the calm aura he exuded became sharper, heavier somehow. Mariah couldn't explain it, but something about him made her stomach tighten. I have business, he said evenly. I am here to ensure this woman and her child are treated with respect. That is my only concern. Sung-ho's jaw tightened. Mariah had seen this before, men trying to assert dominance, but Hyun-soo didn't flinch. He simply watched, a quiet storm contained in a perfectly composed figure. Sung-ho turned his gaze to Mariah, and she could see the irritation in his eyes, the subtle fear he tried to hide. Don't cause trouble, he muttered, stepping back. Hyun-soo's eyes didn't leave him. Respect is not trouble, he said softly. Then, turning to Mariah, he offered a hand, not in intimidation, but in invitation. Let's go somewhere quiet. If you trust me, even a little. Mariah glanced at the hand, the silent offer of protection and perhaps more than that. Her heart raced. This was reckless, impulsive, but something inside her whispered that it was right. She nodded slowly. Okay, just for a little while. They stepped out into the rainy streets again, the neon lights reflecting off puddles like scattered jewels. Hyun-soo guided her to a small, tucked-away tea house he had clearly known about, a place untouched by the city's chaos. The scent of green tea and warm wood wrapped around them as they sat at a low table, the rain outside fading into a gentle background hum. Do you come here often? Mariah asked, trying to break the tension, though her heart was still hammering. He smiled faintly, a small curve that seemed almost human. I know this place. Quiet. Private. Safe. Much like I think people deserve their lives to feel sometimes. His words were deliberate, thoughtful, as if he chose each one carefully. Tell me about yourself. She hesitated, unsure where to begin. There was so much pain, so much exhaustion. And yet, sitting here with him, she felt a strange urge to share a piece of herself. I work a lot. 2 jobs most days. Just trying to make sure Aiden has a good life. Sometimes it feels like, no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. Hyun-soo listened without interrupting, his dark eyes steady, unwavering. When she finished, he leaned forward slightly. You're doing more than enough. Most people would crumble under that kind of pressure. But you endure. You protect him. That is worth admiration, not judgment. Tears pricked her eyes, and she quickly blinked them away. She had learned long ago to hide vulnerability from strangers, but there was something about him, a quiet, unwavering certainty, that made it easier. You really think that? She asked softly. I know it, he said, his voice firm yet gentle. And I also know that someone like you shouldn't have to face the world alone. Mariah looked down at her hands, her heart racing in a way that scared her. She didn't understand it yet, why a man like Hyun-soo would care, but she felt the fragile stirrings of hope. Maybe life could be different. Maybe she didn't have to fight every battle alone. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain tapping against the windows, sharing the quiet comfort of mutual understanding. Hyun-soo didn't pressure her, didn't try to charm her with empty words. He simply existed beside her, a calm presence, an anchor in the storm of her life. When they finally left the tea house, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Hyun-soo walked beside her, careful not to crowd, yet always close enough to feel protective. Mariah noticed how easy it was to move with him, How natural it felt to let him walk her home. For the first time in a long while, she felt the dangerous thrill of possibility, not just for herself, but for Aiden too. At the corner of her street, she turned to him. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. Hyun-soo's eyes softened. You don't need to thank me, he said. Just let me be here. Let me help. That is all I ask. And as she stepped inside her small apartment building, holding Aiden close, Mariah felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, life had more in store than endless struggle. Perhaps someone like Hyun-soo could exist, a man who didn't see her as broken, but as strong, capable, and deserving of care. And perhaps, if she let him in, he could be more than just a protector. Perhaps he could be the beginning of something beautiful. The days passed, each blending into the next, yet Mariah found herself thinking about Hyun-soo more than she wanted to admit. His quiet confidence, his protective presence, and the rare way he truly saw her, strength, flaws, and all, lingered in her mind like a soft, persistent melody. Aiden, too, had begun asking about the man who had appeared like a guardian angel on the rainy street. Mom, when will we see him again? Aiden asked one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, coloring a picture of a superhero with Mariah's hair and his own. She froze, the question catching her off guard. She had been trying to ignore the growing curiosity inside herself. But now, with Aiden's innocent enthusiasm, she felt a pang of something deeper, hope, and perhaps the possibility of love. I'm not sure, sweetie, she said honestly. But maybe soon. Her work at the diner was the same grind as always, but the sting of rejection no longer lingered in the same way. When she saw Sung-ho lurking with his usual sly glances, she no longer felt fear. Hyun-soo had taught her that she didn't have to face challenges alone. And as if on cue, Hyun-soo appeared again, walking into the diner quietly one evening, his presence like a shadow and a shield all at once. Hyun-soo, she said softly, her heart skipping. He smiled, that small, knowing smile that made her pulse quicken. He gestured toward the door. Walk with me. Outside, the city was alive with lights, the faint hum of cars and chatter filling the air. They walked in silence for a few minutes, side by side, the kind of comfortable silence that only comes with unspoken understanding. Finally, Hyun-soo spoke. You're more resilient than anyone I've ever met, he said, his tone casual yet layered with meaning. And yet, I sense that you don't allow yourself to accept help. You carry everything on your own. Mariah looked down at her shoes, the weight of truth in his words making her heart ache. I can't. I've learned to manage. For Aiden. I know, he said softly, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder, not possessively, but as if anchoring her to something steady. But even the strongest people need support. You don't have to be alone in this. Her eyes met his, and in them, she saw something rare, care, sincerity, and a warmth that made her want to believe. She wanted to believe that maybe, for the first time, someone could see both her and Aiden and want them in their life, not as burdens, but as parts of a whole. Hyun-soo. I don't know if I can trust that, she whispered. People, they look at me, at my son, and they see complication. Hardship. They don't see us. He tilted his head slightly, the rain lightly dampening his hair, making him look almost ethereal. I see you, he said simply. Everything. And it's not complication. It's life. And life is beautiful. Her chest tightened, her emotions tangled between fear and longing. There was a gentleness in him that made it possible to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly battling the world alone. A world where someone else could care for her and Aiden with the same fierce intensity she carried for them herself. Mariah started, then stopped, her voice faltering. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be, he said, his smile patient, understanding. I'll wait. And if you let me, I'll stay. Not to change you. Not to fix you. But to be here with you, for you and him. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, fragile and luminous, threading through her chest. Promise? She asked softly, almost as if speaking it aloud would make it real. Promise, he said, and in his eyes, The weight of the words was undeniable. Over the following weeks, Hyun-soo slowly became part of their world. He never intruded, never demanded, but he was always there when she needed him most. Aiden took to him immediately, captivated by his quiet strength and the way he could make a simple walk through the park feel like an adventure. Mariah observed this growing bond with cautious hope, the fear of disappointment always lurking at the edges of her heart. One rainy evening, as they walked together through the dimly lit streets, Aiden tugged on Hyun-soo's hand. "Can you stay for dinner, please?" he asked, his wide eyes earnest. Hyun-soo looked at Mariah, silently asking if it was okay. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, he can stay," she said. That night, as they sat around their small kitchen table, sharing a simple meal, Mariah felt a sense of warmth she hadn't felt in years. Hyun-soo laughed softly at Aiden's stories, listened intently to Mariah's quiet observations, and never once made her feel inadequate or judged. After dinner, as Aiden went to bed, Mariah and Hyun-soo sat in the living room, the city lights filtering through the blinds. She felt a nervous energy thrumming in the space between them, a delicate tension that hadn't been there before. "Mariah," he said softly, "I don't expect anything. I just want you to know. I care. About you. About him. About both of you. And if you let me, I want to be part of your life. Not to replace anything, not to overshadow anything. Just to stand with you." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief and gratitude, not sadness. I think I'd like that," she said finally. "I think I'd like that very much." Hyun-soo reached out, taking her hand gently. "Then we'll take it slow. Step by step. No rush. No pressure. Just us." And in that moment, Mariah felt the tight knots of fear and loneliness begin to loosen. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just survival. A future that included laughter, warmth, and the quiet, steady presence of someone who truly saw her. Hyun-soo didn't just become a protector. He became a companion, a presence that made life feel lighter and less lonely. They walked through the streets of Seoul together, through rain and sun, through challenges and triumphs, and Mariah realized that love wasn't about perfection or easy paths. It was about finding someone who could see your strength, honor your struggles, and walk beside you anyway. One evening, as they watched Aiden play in a nearby park, Hyun-soo stood close behind Mariah, his hand brushing hers. "You're amazing," he said softly, almost to himself. Mariah smiled, leaning slightly into him. "So are you," she whispered. And in the bustling heart of Seoul, amid the neon lights and endless motion, a struggling single mom and a man of power and quiet mystery found the beginnings of something extraordinary. It was not a story of instant perfection, but of connection, trust, and the slow, beautiful unfolding of love. For Mariah, it was the start of a new chapter, a chapter where she didn't have to fight alone. And for Hyun-soo, it was a revelation, that even in a world built on strength and influence, the most profound power was the ability to see, to protect, and to love without condition. As night fell over the city, Mariah took a deep breath, feeling Aiden's small hand in hers, and Hyun-soo's reassuring presence beside her. Life was still messy, still complicated, but for the first time, it felt full of promise, hope, and the kind of love that could withstand anything. And so, under the neon glow of Seoul, three lives intertwined, resilient, hopeful, and quietly, beautifully, in love.